Check, check, check. Use that other mic.
All right, guys, thanks for coming. So we've got Mr. Trey Ford here to talk. Trey Ford is a global security strategist at Rapid7, where he serves as a customer resource, industry, and community advocate. Over the past 15 years, Trey's run Black Hat events worldwide as general manager and served in functions ranging from incident response, project management, as a PCI QSA and a security engineer for a variety of industry leaders, including Zynga, McAfee, Fishnet Security, and White Hat Security. So with that, Mr. Trey Ford talking about maturing InfoSec.
Morning, guys. How's everybody doing? Wow, that's hot. Maybe I shouldn't stand in front of that thing, right? You guys doing well? Ish? You guys still mad at Kansas City? All right. My name is Trey Ford. I serve as global security strategist at Rapid7. We do data security and analytics. Some of you know us from Nexpo. Some of you guys know us from Metasploit. Very excited to be back out here. I haven't seen Michael or Dave in a long time. I used to work closely with Dave, so I'm very excited to be here joining you guys. This talk, the session we're going to explore together, is talking a little bit about our industry. InfoSec's a rather new discipline. It's a new profession. And, we're working hard to mature this. We're working hard to, I think, iterate and drive and change how we operate, how we interface with the business. And I think we have an opportunity to partner differently. I think we have an opportunity to not reinvent the wheel, but steal some ideas from other industries, specifically aviation. So I'm going to tell a little bit about my story as a new aviator just getting started. Why is that funny? All right, I'm not putting that slide back up, so put your phones down. So for me, as a new aviator, just getting started, the date was July 3rd, 2010. It was a beautiful day. This was my first day flying as a pilot. My first day as a private pilot, fully licensed, good to go. Yeah. I was super excited about it. My neighbor was crazy enough to bring his brother, who was in town visiting, and he wanted to go flying with me, so we went to Palo Alto Airport. Now, it was beautiful. 29.94 inches of mercury, for those of you not into aviation, severe clear. There were like dustings of cloud in the sky. Beautiful. Wind coming almost right down the runway. I mean, like, it doesn't get any cleaner, it doesn't get any prettier. Now, how many of you guys know the San Francisco Bay Area very well? You fly in and out of there. This is busy airspace. As far as pilots go, this is hectic. All right, Palo Alto's at the end of this little orange arrow. We're right underneath something we call Class Bravo. This is underneath the San Francisco International Airport, one of the busiest airports on Earth, final approach for their primary runways. If you take off, you're literally under their airspace. So they run this like a well-oiled machine. Palo Alto Airport is a wild place for a very specific reason. Some days, it's unbelievably busy. A lot of folks in Palo Alto like to fly, California. We heard from Mike about how, startup folks, they aspire for a bigger boat or a bigger airplane. A lot of folks there fly. So sometimes at Palo Alto Airfield, you run up to the runway and there are like 11 people waiting to take off in front of you. Other days, it's a ghost town. This day was one of those days. You pull onto the field, you haven't seen a soul. You're walking around the airplane doing your pre-flight checklist. You never see a soul. You don't hear an airplane taking off or landing. It is a beautiful day. There's no one home. So Tom and his brother jump in the plane, fire up the engine. You've got your start checklist. First thing you do is jump on the radio. You get the weather. They've got this automated weather service. You write down the weather, the wind, all that stuff. You calibrate your instruments, and then you contact the control tower. This is a towered airfield, so you contact the tower, and you drive from parking over to this area where you run up and test out your airplane, make sure the engine's running, all this sort of stuff. So you identify yourself. It's a unique identifier. It's your tail number on the airplane. Palo Alto Tower, Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo. I'm parked at Tango 22. I have information Bravo. I let them know I got the current weather. I'd like to run up to runway 31. Looking at Tom. I don't want to compare an MIT grad as smart as Tom was to a puppy in the car, but man, they're so excited. I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's nobody here. Palo Alto Tower, Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo, request. So there's this really complicated workflow that takes a towered airport. When the tower is not in operation, it turns it into a untowered airport. So you just self-announce. Palo Alto traffic, Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo. I'm at Romeo 22. I'm going to taxi over to runway 31. I'm just telling people where I am. Airplanes don't come with a reverse. We can't back up if we're in, like, if you pull in front of somebody and they're facing you, you have to get out of the airplane and pull it around and turn it around. It's a really awful process. So we just talk a lot. So I run over to the run-up area. We run through the run-up checklist. Engines running beautifully. Still no airplanes. Why is nobody flying today? Gorgeous. Palo Alto Tower. I'm trying it again. Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo. It's Trey. We're ready to go. Nobody home. Gosh, that's weird. Time's a little after 5 o'clock. Clear as can be. So excited to go flying. So I switch over to CTAF, the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. This is for everyone off of the airfield. People flying in. Palo Alto traffic, Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo. All aircraft in the airspace, please advise. There's nobody flying. Awesome. So I taxi onto the runway. I announce my position. My intent, I'm going to take off. You've flown in the pattern. You take off, you fly that racetrack, and you come back into land. I'm just going to do a quick takeoff and landing, dial in my touch, make sure I'm all squared away. I'm a little nervous. This is my first flight without my instructor, with passengers. You can't fly passengers without an instructor until you're a fully licensed pilot. It's my first day. I'm so excited. Add the throttle. We're accelerating. Everything becomes effective. My control surfaces are deflecting. Takeoff smooth. It was smooth. Climbing up. Palo Alto traffic. Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo. Turning downwind. Announce my way through the pattern. I come back into land. My cell phone starts to ring. I'm on short final. This means I'm getting low. You get nervous when things low. When the planet gets close, things are happening. Things are getting real. You know, everyone talks about how the plane landing was. How was your flight? Rough landing. Always about the landing. We all care about the landing. Getting down short final, my phone rings. I pull out my cell phone. I hand it to Tom. This is crew resource management. It's a thing. I hand it to my partner, Tom. Tom answers the phone. Trey, it's for you. Small airplanes. We wear those headsets. It's the hands-free device. You just kind of stick it in there. Probably not legal. Did it anyway. Stuff it into my headset. Hello, this is Trey. Yes, Farrell Ford. My legal name's Farrell. When I hear Farrell, it's maybe a cop, maybe the feds, maybe HR, but it's never good. Yeah, this is Farrell. How may I be of service? Are you flying 733 Zulu Kilo? Yes, sir. I'm landing. All right, pretty smooth. Tom's over there looking around. Oh, this is awesome. He's so excited. How come you're not answering on the radio? I'm on the radio. Hey, can you clear the runway? Palo Alto traffic, Cessna 733 Zulu Kilo, clear of active runway 31. Yeah, I'm on the radio. Why aren't you responding? I'm off the runway. I'm sitting there. I'm like, stand by. I'm going to reboot my radio. Now, this is one of those Garmin in-dash units. Everyone hold your hand up. You've done this on the old school radios. You put your thumb on top of the knob. You click it off, click it on. Do it with me. Hands up. Thumb on top of the knob. This is really important. Click it off, click it on. Where's your thumb? Where it started? File that away. That'll be important here in a little bit. The facts of these are undisputed. Like, this is important. Software, the radio reboots, comes back online. This thing's still going through its boot sequence. It's pulling down GPS coordinates, doing its self-test. But the radio's the first thing to come live. I hear a very frantic young man. Jimmy, the guy that just called me. There are 5 airplanes in the pattern, and he's having to direct them, like tell them to fly in circles, figure out what this clown's doing, taking off on my airfield. You've gotten that phone call. You've had to call the boss with that phone call. Things got real for me. I just had what they classify as an uncleared departure. I took off in controlled airspace under some of the busiest controlled airspace in the world, without permission. That's not just a speeding violation, boys and girls. My first flight as a pilot, I think they're about to clip my wings. Hey, Trey, I need you to come up to the control tower. We need to fill some paperwork. When I got to the control tower, I brought my little paper permit, my printout. I'm a licensed pilot. Yeah, the number of digits and stuff doesn't match what a real pilot license has. Like, he's like, I don't know how to fill this thing out. Great. So this last year, I was invited to come speak at RSA. And on Monday, when they do the leadership class, we're talking to new executives in the security profession. There are probably 1,400 people in the room. I asked, how many of you guys are first-time CISOs? 1,000 hands, guys and girls, all across the room. You've been to that room. You've been to that rock concert. You've had that moment. Just, you feel the whole room with you. Gasp. Whoa. There's only 400 in this room of 1,400-ish. More hands than anything else. How many of you guys are first-time CISOs as the first CISO at the company you work for? Same body of hands. That gasp turns to goosebumps. You're like, oh man, we're screwed. You guys are all making this up. Maturing the profession, when we start looking forward into what we're trying to achieve, brings two words to mind: wise and prescient. Wisdom, something that I think Mike was talking about in the keynote today, is this notion of living with experience. The same way that you respond, not react, right? And prescient, when executed flawlessly, is to have foreseen an event coming. You rehearsed. Practice. You must practice. Mike was dead on. The day of my first flight, I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew how to fly. I knew how to do everything right. My protocol, I thought, was perfect. I had a software glitch. How could I have detected that? What could I have done? But I responded professionally. I did all that I knew how. When it comes to InfoSec, guys, we're talking, you guys are some of the best and the brightest in the game. I mean, like, ask any IT person. We're definitely smarter, right? We know what we're doing. It's awful. So the agenda, the things I want to explore with you today are these. First, humans have a justifiable fear. When we talk about information security, when we talk about technology, we're going to talk a little bit about magic. Certification and peer endorsement. There's a slash through this. I don't think we have that yet. And then finally, what meaningful information sharing might look like. Any of you guys work in like any of the ISACs? You're in threat sharing or intel sharing? A couple hands that say yeah, a couple hands that don't tell anybody on that. We're going to break that down, and I'm going to challenge your perspective, I hope. I think we can make this a lot simpler. Fear. There was a day that pilots were stupid. That day may still be today. How many of you guys fly, like, as passengers pretty frequently? You're going to be questioning that after today's talk. Fear is justifiable. I don't think we've gotten past FUD and InfoSec. But users are afraid of the unknown. What happens on the other side of that keyboard is magic. Can you explain it? We're pretty smart. We actually can. Anyone else using this technology? Not a chance. Not so much. There was a day people were afraid of flying, and we learned a lot of things. Chief of which, I think, was how to solve this fear of flying. This is a major industry. It's critical infrastructure now. I think there's a handful of things we can do to manage fear. How long has it been since you heard about a new breach in the news? Days? Fair enough. That's about right. Now, this is what everybody saw in the newspapers. That was the golden age of flight. What I think got us past this fear, and it's a rational fear, it's a data-driven fear, was transparency. You guys are familiar with the NTSB, the National Traffic Safety Board. You guys all live in Texas, most of you? All right. How far do you have to drive on a highway before you see that sign saying how many deaths there have been on the highways this year? This is Houston. I don't drive around here, but your roads suck. What I think it's going to take to mature this is a notion of transparency. They were very clear in two things. One, communicating what had happened, and number two, running all the way to the ground what they think caused it. They were forwarding the entire discipline, not just their pilot brand, not just their sponsors, not just the airline they were trying to build. What caused a failure? Was it tied to conditions? They were focused on failure analysis. Was it systemic or endemic? Was it a single wing, a mono wing? Was it the type of propulsion where the engine was located? Was there a weak part? Were there wrong types of materials being used? They shared their investigations and their lessons learned. Transparency in what they found With me so far? We're going to drive this further. Really? I've got it on this screen, not that screen. Let's go there. Computers are hard. You guys all buy cars. Have you ever, in IT, we talk about mean time between failure like it's going out of style. We know exactly what uptime and the average lifetime of a system looks like. We know all about these things. Maybe not that now that we're cloudy technology people. Have you had this discussion about a car? What's the average lifetime of the car, the runtime? What's the service interval? We talk about it, but not nearly as much, right? Doesn't really happen. Have you ever read the end user license agreement that comes with your car? I'm serious. I hope Charlie Miller did. What's interesting about this to me is that, I think VW, chiefly among other people, have learned they're software companies that transport people. BMW's known this for a long time. They've been writing software for the longest time, and they know they're building technology, machines that move people. What we haven't gotten to is this notion of being able to talk about what we've found. This is a conversation that's still unsafe. This is something I think we need to work on, not just for our own sake, but for our businesses. So this is something we need to foster. Do we still get upset when someone lets us know about a breach? Granted, they didn't have to tell us at 4 o'clock on a Friday, but we still get upset about it, don't we? We want to champion that. We want to make that safer. Board certification. How many here have a CISSP? You know some things. Half the room admits it, another part of the room a little quieter. When Amelia got her license as a pilot, do you know what the flight test looked like? I can tell you that, me as a first-time pilot, I'd flown my 40 hours. I'd done a check ride, I'd done stage checks, I'd taken a written test, I'd done all this stuff. Early pilots, when they took off, flown a figure 8, and came back and landed, they were a pilot. Now, I've seen people drive in Houston. I assume your driver's test is very similar. I want you to go drive in the parking lot, drive in a circle, and then just put the car in park. And I don't care where you're at. Why is that funny? It's funny because it's true. It's right. This notion of board certification, the magic here is that your body of peers has looked at you and worked with you and said, you know what? They have our common body of knowledge. They understand what's right and wrong. They understand how to make difficult decisions, and we're going to stand behind them. I don't know that we're really there yet. We're definitely not there at the executive level. This is something I think we can strive towards. I'm going to be a little edgy. How many of you guys are red team and research-oriented folks? I know a couple of you in the room are. You don't have to be embarrassed about it. We love you. There may be a day where we need to talk about registration for testers. I'm scared to death of this. In discussions with governmental folks, Rapid7 spends a lot of time and a lot of energy working on public affairs because we care about the community. One of the proposals that was put out there was, hey, look, maybe we just need a registration for all the hackers out there. I'm like using small words. Are you like a Marvel or DC Comics fan? Like Registry of the Mutants? Ring any bells with you? Does that sound like a really good idea? In all seriousness, I can tell you at Black Hat how afraid people were to put their names on things and to give us information. Like, we looked at the information that they gave us in the call for papers process as gold, not of value. It was more like a curse. People want to protect their identities. People are afraid that other folks will know what they know and use them for reasons, bad things. Like, we're very afraid. Not just paranoid, we're justifiably paranoid. We know how the magic works. We're trying to help change it. There may be a day where we need to talk about what it is to self-identify or communicate our presence in a way that, scarily enough, is going to be opt-in. We need to think about what professional boundaries and professional research looks like. It's a scary thing to talk about, but one of two things will happen. Either we're going to explore this conversation together, or someone's going to do it for us. With me? Difficult. I'm not comfortable with it, but we need to be thinking about it. Board certification along that line also means knowing the boundaries of what good and bad look like, what's safe and what's not. How many of you guys do web app testing? Either perform it or have it done for you? Yeah, Praetorian guy, raise your hand higher. It's nothing to be embarrassed of. How many of you guys do it live in production? It's exposed to the internet. Why not? Preach. Bad guys are doing it for us anyway. It's free testing. So at HouSecCon, we're real big on analytics. This is the Society of Information Risk. If you're not following them on Twitter, follow them. If you're not on Twitter, fix that too. In flight, we have boundaries. We have known tolerances. When we say 100%, what we mean is 80%. Our 100% scale is capped to maintain tolerances, right? You guys remember on Top Gun talking about flying to the edges of the envelope? How fast and aggressively you can fly? That's what this is. This here on the left side is the envelope. This deals with speed, weight, and maneuvering. And red is bad, and green is good. And there are places where you don't want to fly. On the right side, this is stall and Mach buffet boundaries. You probably will never fly a plane that does this as a pilot, unless you're in the military or fly commercial. Anybody here flown a jet, like piloted a jet? Oh, good. So if I get this wrong, I'm safe. The top left corner here is called coffin corner. What happens is, as you approach the Mach limit, remember, as you climb in altitude, the air gets thinner. Any of you afraid of flying and fly commercially? I was going to say earmuffs. Now's the time. What's going to happen is airliners, this is your captain speaking, we're currently at 36,000 feet, the air is nice and smooth, we're going to turn off your seatbelt signs. Be sure to move about the cabin safely. They're at 36,000 feet, the air is extremely thin. Less resistance on the plane, less lift being generated. They're flying fast. They're approaching the speed of sound. You know the U-2 bomber had about a 5-mile-an-hour variance between flying and stalling, and not falling out of the sky, but temporarily losing control. They could not fly it manually. They had to use autopilot while they were running their missions at those altitudes. Coffin corner is where most of the airlines operate. They're up there really high, they're very efficient, they're very fast, but they've got to be very deliberate and very smooth and very gentle. It's a dangerous place. You don't want to fly out there on the edge of the envelope. That's what they do. The reason that this is safe is we've done the testing. We've pushed it to the edges and we do it in production because we know that where the boundaries are. We don't have those standards for safety testing, which is arguably why we don't test in production. There's probably a reason why cars, airplanes, and other folks are afraid to talk to us about testing in these ways. So what happens when what we know hits the boundary? What happens when we go to the edge? You guys have gotten this phone call too. Everyone gets that call. Target, Home Depot, Sony Pictures. I ask you, how many of you guys work in PCI? You have some relationship in some way, shape, or form to credit card data, or you test for it. All of us do in some way, shape, or form, or some other regulation. The breaches that affect those things, that hit the newspapers, what do you really know? What do you really know about those breaches? Is anyone in this room dumb enough to have to talk to the press about what happens? Can I explain how this works? So you remember, you heard in the news that Sony Pictures had a domain admin account compromised, and that's how they got all the machines. Changed all their backgrounds, all their screensavers, did all this stuff, right? You remember that. That's a fact. I pulled that out of my rear. That was me. Here's how this works. There's two categories of people that talk to the press on this. People that are chasing the press and want to make a name for themselves. I hope that's not me. The second is, it's your job to do press response and try to help pull the hyperbole out and try to have a conversation in a meaningful way. The press comes and says, listen, here's what we know to be true. What does this mean? So you tell me that all the screensavers, not some of them or in certain networks, all the screensavers and all the backgrounds across the entire organization got changed. That sounds like some pretty sophisticated malware. Is that where your head went? Unless a GPO maybe is malware. So that was my best guess. So that's how the conversation goes. You know, it might be this, it might be that. I think it might have been a GPO. If it was that uniform and it touched everybody, it was probably a GPO, but I can't be sure. There's always more data. Now, we all question ourselves. Like, we will argue till we're blue in the face when someone's wrong on the internet, but we will question ourselves endlessly because we always want more data. The way that it works in the press is they take your best guess, and you've seen it on TV. Tonight at 7, cybersecurity expert confirms that. It's a scary process, but this is what we know. What about this one? You guys heard about this? When Han Solo crashed the Millennium Falcon at the golf course in Orange County? Maybe that was better. You heard about this. Anybody know what happened here? Anybody into planes here? A few of you. You guys know what happened. So what happens differently in aviation? The National Traffic Safety Board, the aircraft crash response team goes out and does an immediate analysis. They go and collect all this data, and they come out with an initial statement. Here's what we know. This is what came out. It looks like this, but basically we know that the pilot took off, encountered an engine failure at this altitude, at this bearing, about this speed. Pilot performed these steps, communicated this. Here's the radio transcript, and then crash landed on the airfield. We're trying to fix the Millennium Falcon. We're going to get it back to running. Here's where we're at. This is what we know. The facts of the matter are these. They are undisputed. But we have an idea. How many of you guys 2 years ago, Thanksgiving, were stranded or your holiday travel was thrown off because of the South Korean airline crash at San Francisco International Airport? You guys remember that one? Everybody in the room. Really simple. If you're coming in short of the runway, what do? You push the gas, right? Accelerate just a little bit more. Root cause and what it took to run that all the way to the ground and figure out exactly how and why that mistake happened, different conversation. But man, wouldn't you just love to know exactly what's happening when other companies get breached? I mean, remember, you're reading the news. Someone's pontificating. Someone talked to a pontiff and came back and discussed what they thought happened. Sometimes we get asked to push things under the rug. Sometimes we're asked to help put together a story. I don't think we should help the attacker in any way. I don't think we should help the attacker raise their return on investment. They spent money or time or energy building malware, acquiring exploits and practicing and testing them against environments. They're doing things. Now, classic information sharing probably follows a spectrum like this. Sorry for the eye chart. Please don't take notes or pictures. We'll post it. This is a spectrum, right? Simple IP addresses. Depending on what country you're from, you might consider that PHI. I think it's pretty nominal. People's IP addresses change. This runs up all the way through domain. Then it jumps up to more sensitive levels like log entries, and I know what your behaviors were. This goes all the way up to network logs and proxy logs. I know what you're surfing. I know what your chat session looked like. I know what your email looked like. It gets all the way down to forensic images. On this spectrum, some of it's sensitive, and it gets increasingly scary. Information sharing is challenging. Any of you guys living with the sticks and taxi world, that whole conversation? I don't know that we can legally share a whole lot of this information right now. Maybe we can. I'm not a lawyer. I'm definitely not your lawyer. Nothing I'm telling you here should be taken as guidance. But I wonder what would happen if we talked a little bit more about breaches. If you are taking notes, write this down. VERIS. VERIS. Vocabulary for event recording and incident sharing. What I think is far more valuable is if we have a discussion around what events are happening, what events have been stopped, what events are getting through. This would be moving towards a performance-based program. How many of you guys read the DBIR? Shrug. Yeah, we read it. I think this is the seminal piece of research that happens every year. We get an idea of what's getting through. There's a serious sample bias that happens. It's very focused on credit card data and other regulatory data sets. But this is by far the most critical thing because we know some pattern of what's working against us. Anybody know what this aircraft is, the Model 299? B17 Bomber. All right, we do have some aviation people in the room. Do you remember the story of the B-17, how it first got started? We needed a long-range air superiority bomber. This is what we needed. They came out to test this out. This was Boeing's response to a governmental proposal and contract. And so they got in this airplane. They put the Army's chief test pilot. There was no more qualified pilot anywhere in the world. They get in. They've got the reporters, all the brass from the military there to watch this thing. Guy fires it up. They've never seen a plane with 4 engines rumbling on the wing like this. Guy fires it up, thunders down the runway, takes off smooth, beautiful, climbs up to about 300 feet, shudders, slowly rolls over, and crashes. 3 of the 5 people on board died. Scary. For all pilots, this is interesting in one reason. They almost lost the contract because he left the parking brake on. There was a control lock that would lock effectively the steering wheel, the ailerons and the flap controls. A lot of wing surface on a plane this big. It needs to be able to lift heavy payloads of bombs and fly a long ways efficiently. The parking brake was on. The steering wheel was locked. And this was the birth. I'm going to kill myself on this thing. This was the birth of the checklist. This is where the aviation checklist came from. You know, a couple of years ago, when surgeons started using checklists, like aviation's been doing it for almost 100 years at this point, welcome to the club. This is where we learned it. Now, here's the magic. This is why aviation matured so quickly. Things that would happen would be ran to the ground. We would find the root cause, we would communicate what we knew, and communicate what we weren't sure about, and we would make sure everyone else knew. So information sharing, the preliminary report, when the Millennium Falcon crashed at the golf course, we knew, here are the facts, and we're investigating these other things we're not sure about yet. Airworthiness directives. Listen, we found out that the suspension on this model of aircraft is faulty, and sometimes you can't get the gear down. Landing without wheels underneath your plane is bad. Maybe we shouldn't let any more take off. And they would ground all the airplanes, like that's a normal thing. NOTAMs, notices to airmen. I get emails all the time. Every time the president flies somewhere, I don't have his itinerary, but I know I'm not allowed to fly in this area, or I'll meet some nice chap flying a fighter. They let us know about these things. TFR, temporary flight restrictions. You can't fly over baseball games and college football games. There's all these different things. Some idiots flying a drone, my airport. These are the sorts of things they're letting us know because safety's involved. If you see something, say something. How many of you guys have heard about this one? This rings bells? So DHS used this with permission, of course. Maybe they've all told them. From New York. If you see something, say something. It works at the airport. You hear it all the time. You hear it at the bus station or the train. I guess you guys don't do that in Houston. But it doesn't work on the internet. If we distill this all the way down to its purest place, if you see something, say something means I will make it safe and I will encourage you to let me know if you see something. Some of you love bug bounties, some of you hate bug bounties. We can talk more about the religion behind that. But to the point, partnering with the public to bring something to your attention is so powerful. But we can't do it on the internet. It's just not safe. We're trying to improve that. That's part of what we're fighting for. So my buddy Dan's in the room, and he gave me some feedback on this talk track. Information sharing is challenging for a number of very valid reasons, and I want to explore those. I can't fully dispel these because I think there's a lot of merit here. Aviation's not like information security or cybersecurity, if that's more your brand, because people die. How many of you work in or around application security? I was in New York Monday and Tuesday talking with some executives, and they told me, Trey, point blank, look, I look at OWASP vulnerabilities, and the bottom line is that's not really what's causing me problems. Cross-site scripting is important, I care about it, but it doesn't hurt my business. Interesting. Interesting. The motivation's different. Of course, people have a rational fear of flying. We've got to find a way to motivate that. It informs attackers. So what you're telling me is if we tell the world that somebody broke in here, that's going to make them a better attacker, right? They'll know that we found them, we know what they're using, what they're doing. When someone crashes an airplane and we publish a report, does that make gravity more effective at killing people? Absolutely. It's a correct perspective. At the end of the day, my challenge to you is this, and I think it's a valid concern and a correct way to push back. I think we would all agree we live to hunt, pursue, and punish. I want to punch miscreants. I hate the bad guys, and I imagine most of you do too. Not because they give me a job, but frankly, I could sleep better, longer, less interrupted if we made miscreants' jobs a little rougher. So my aspirations are in a couple places. I want to make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more costly, and a little bit more dangerous. Why should they get to use the same piece of malware in my environment and your environment without us being able to say, hey, look out for these things? And I'm not going to say it happens at line speed, but why can't we talk about that? There's valid concerns about perception. Well, our company dealt with an incident. We were attacked. We had a piece of malware. We had an infection. We had an outage. These are things we're worried about, right? because the general public is afraid that they'll have to reboot a computer or come back later. They've never dealt with the heartache that comes with a delayed flight. They've never had an Amazon Prime purchase show up a day late. I think they're accustomed to this. We hear about attacks and compromises all the time. Why can't we just say, hey, we took a hit? Is it really that scary? Are our executives really afraid of saying that? It's kind of sad, isn't it? What would you do, you personally, right now, if one of your favorite organizations, like for instance, I would go to Lowe's, I would go to Home Depot. Why? It's half a mile closer, and I like it. If Lowe's got hit, now, Lowe's, to my knowledge, hasn't been compromised yet. Nothing major, nothing headline, from my perspective, recent memory. If Lowe's came out and said, hey, listen, we've had a breach, an external actor, an organization, and I don't care if you say it's China, I'd rather you say, look, we're not really sure who it is. They broke in, they were targeting these systems. They were more interested in our credit application process than credit card numbers. We identified it, we stopped it at 3 stores before it moved any further. Those people that have been affected have already been contacted. We've communicated this to everyone that we know and other firms that use the same services we do, the same technology stack. The vendors have been notified. These actors took these actions. This is A4. This is under Verus. This is what their JSON is structured with. 4 A's. If you're writing stuff down, write this down. Actors take actions. Assets have security attributes. So 4 A's. Actors, actions, assets, attributes. If they communicated that with some degree of confidence and just said, look, we don't know these other pieces. We don't really know what they got out with. We know they touched these records. I would not blink to continue shopping there. They're fighting the good fight. They took it on the chin. They're still at it. I think that'd be amazing, and I would vote with my money. That's what I think we could get to. If we are able to communicate what's happening, what's being stopped, and what's getting through with confidence, and we could share this information, and we could learn from each other in this way, I think we could change how we prioritize and how we drive security. I think aside from crying in a beer with friends at conferences, looking at the DBIR is one of our key places to say, look, other companies wrestle with these things, and we've learned these lessons from other people. If we could get to this place where we could share this, we could move to performance-based security. Listen, compliance guy, look, I know you just got out of college and you still know it all. And I'm really glad you're here to tell me how to do my job better that I've been doing for 15 years. And, I love that flavor of antivirus, but we're not going to run it. What we're seeing in our environment, they're targeting this. This is what we've not maintained a healthy level of control on, and we're going to pour our energy and our resources and our money over here. I don't know, pick whatever control set that is. And we move to performance-based security. I know this is aspirational. I know this is slightly out of reach, but this is the direction I want to look towards. Pilots religiously read crash reports. When Han Solo crashed his airplane, every pilot looked. When the South Korean airliner fell short of the runway at SFO, every pilot learned. Every one of us. Anytime someone flying an M20C Mooney, the same plane I fly, has an incident or an issue, I read and I learn. And I know that piston 3 runs a little hot. I know all of her little peccadillos. I know all the little things she's frustrated with. And I know all the parts that I need to pay attention to. Because I study everything just like me. The only thing we have right now is the DBIR. Even if you can't get permission to share it and publish this information or give it back to the Verus community, I'm going to ask that you prepare for the day that you can. You're capturing data, you're capturing metrics. You could probably tell me about the half-life of the vulnerabilities, how long it takes you to get a patch cycled out, how long it takes to get a patch into your application environment for web-facing apps. But can you tell me specifically how many incidents you've dealt with in the last year? How much time it took to investigate them? What key types of action types are being hit? What security attributes are affecting the assets that are involved? This is the data that's going to change our game. This is the data that's going to change what we do. We've got to end with Top Gun. So this is the scene right after they buzz the tower. The question on the table was, if we got called into battle today, would you want them with you? I had to go talk to someone at the FSDO, the Flight Standards District Office. Has a really boring governmental name. So there were 2 phone calls that happened right after I talked to the control tower. First, listen, you're going to get a phone call from the airport manager. You might want to call and introduce yourself. Leave her a message. You've had this phone call. And you were as polite as you could be. Hey, my name's Trey Ford. Listen, I met this really nice guy in the tower, Jimmy. Apparently it was his first day in the tower. Man, he's had a day. I just wanted to make sure that I was the first to let you know. He did a great job, managing air traffic and, the little glitch I had with my radio. I'm so busted and I know it. You've had this conversation. The next conversation's with my dad. My dad's a pilot. I learned to fly to get to know my dad. Dad, you're not going to believe this. You did what? Trey, the control tower has this big red light cannon. They blink at you to let you know, don't take off. All right, runway 31's about like this. The sunset usually sets to the west. Yes? The way this set up is from where I'm sitting at the run-up and onto the runway, there's the control tower and the sun's right behind it. Let me get this, Buzz Lightyear. You're going to blink me to stop my airplane in front of the sun? Good talk. Bad plan. Cool. So the next words I'll never forget. Dad's like, so have you thought about talking to a lawyer or taking one with you at the FSDO meeting? I was doing some work with the Civil Air Patrol, teaching children, young people, about math and science, about how math and algebra, numbers can dance. Physics is where that math comes to life. We're trying to get kids involved in math and science. So there's this little time where the adults are doing their thing and the kids are doing their thing. We're working on the next piece, and so I tell the guys the story. And they're like, ask David, he's in the Red Light Club too. There's a dunce collection of us that have done stupid things, and I'm part of that club now. The question immediately after is, so you should talk to him. He had a great lawyer go with him. I'm like, crap. And this is the decision we face. While you have the decision to determine how you encode and capture data and what metrics you're reporting and how you're driving metrics to mature your program, and make no mistake about it, our job is decision support. We don't tell IT what to do. We influence them. The metrics we report are engines, not cameras. We're not telling people what to do or capturing them doing good and bad. The metrics we provide are engines. Kelvin said, you can't improve something if you don't measure it. As you measure things, people teach to the test. People work to the measurement. You're going to drive activity. I challenge you to try to adopt Varus. Look for ways to use it. Look for ways to start tracking what actions are being taken. What attributes are being affected on your assets. Think about that. I go in to talk to the FSDO. I didn't take a lawyer. I walk in. There's one guy, Mr. Smith. And he had a couple buddies. And I walk in. There's a little recorder on the table. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm looking for a camera. There had to have been one. I'm not sure I saw it. So we'd like to discuss a report we got on 03 July 2010, 1645, Palo Alto Airfield. That's there. So we talked through it. I'm like, listen, I'm going to pay this forward because I believe I'm part of something bigger, and I want to support this. I know the lessons I'm going to learn here and the mistakes I've made, if we capture these effectively, are going to improve the rest of the flight system. It's going to affect other pilots. It'll affect decisions on airspace, on education, on checklists. I'm not saying I'm holy. I'm not saying I did the right thing. It was probably pretty stupid not to take a lawyer, but the facts of the matter are these, and they are undisputed. Here's what I did. Here's my decision-making process. Did you know they put secondary radios in airplanes? Thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been a pleasure to be here. If you've got questions, I'll take them out. Yes, sir. The Chris Roberts, yes. I'm intimately aware of what the Chris Roberts situation. So this was the hacker on an airplane, flying an airplane sideways and performing live testing with souls on the airplane. Laughably, it's a philosophical question, and I would love to take that further offline. I'm not going to do that certain way. It's being recorded. My boss will hear about it. Very pointedly, there's a time to have permission to do testing. I believe that technology does need a level of scrutiny. I believe that software, anything powered by software, was written by a human, as it turns out. Humans make mistakes. In aviation, we believe in mistakes. We talk about human error. The vast majority of crashes happen because of human error. I believe we need to make the discovery and the existence of those errors okay, and we need to move very, very quickly to contain those. The Chris Roberts situation was challenging in a lot of ways, and I think there are probably better ways to explore that. And the technology perspective? Yeah. Very pointedly, as a pilot, we rely on a lot of systems. There's ACARs for the big guys, communicating with the ground for clearances, routing, weight and balance, arrival, that kind of information. There's, what am I looking for? I'm fumbling a word. This happens on stage. George, autopilot. Autopilot's actually software. All these things are software. And there are decisions being made on my behalf. As pilot in command, it's my duty to contain or limit or eliminate systems that are influencing the aircraft. And in the vast majority of systems, most vast majority of aircraft, it is fully separated. Bottom line is, as an attacker, as a researcher tinkering with a system, you don't know if that system does have full separation, or if a pilot does have the full ability. We need to be very considerate when we think about those things. We can't make those assumptions. Sir? Certainly. Sure.
The other problem, I love a lot of your analysis, the problem that we face today is engineering. Build even a part for an airplane, or build a building or a bridge or anything critical infrastructure in the rest of the world. You've got levels and levels of engineering, testing, regulation, even building 3 times per neighborhood.
Right.
Without code and permits. But by God, we have a 17-year-old writing software that becomes part of the internet critical infrastructure.
That's right.
That has not gone through even a shadow of any of that. Now, the moment we start doing that, we're going to run into handcuffs on innovation.
Sure.
And that's the reason why it hasn't. But at some point in time, we need to figure out how to apply engineering, true engineering, to software development.
I couldn't agree more. So the first part of the question, dealing with timeline, how long do we have? We're over time. All right. We'll jam in a little bit. Hey guys, you've been a great crowd. Thank you so much for your time.